Good afternoon and welcome to the House of Eris. I am Grandmaster Williams, PhD. I am a manager of the New Discordian Society, and I was installed as Grandmaster by Grandmaster Crowley. I am also fifth degree in the Polytheo Meta-Animistic of Eris Esoteric, which is a pope. And I want to make a disclaimer that what I'm sharing is based on and inspired by my two things: personal opinion and academic investigation. So I might share a fact here or there. And at best, I only intend to share my opinion. It is some philosophy here. So even with regard to facts, the way I explain them might not be quite the way somebody else might, right? Because, well, there's the emotion and my personal reason to include it that is also involved. So, as above, so below. As within, so without. I'm also wearing my Greek letters, right? I finished the master's course in Rotar chapter of Phi Theta Kappa independently, and also in my hometown, where, of course, I had those types of agricultural resources and commercial news channel support circles. But we want to talk about the Leary's model of the 8 circuits of consciousness. And this is the 7th lecture, and it is all about the 7th circuit of consciousness and how the 8 circuits of consciousness are relevant or related to us in this fraternity as a brotherhood, only to get to the nucleus of the universal brotherhood, right? To better ourselves, understand ourselves better, so that we can become more of an impact, more capable of empowering others, because we would know the roadmap, if you will, to how, right, in order to develop this level of relations. And I personally believe that is something we, as Discordians or enlightened Masons, should be fostering. It's not a beyond, something we would do, right, or something we would support. The 7th circuit of the 8 circuits of consciousness is the Neurogenetic Circuit. It allows access to the genetic memory, right, contained in DNA, right? So we can probably maybe look at this in a physiological way if we're mature enough into a discussion about this circuit. I don't know if we're going to get that deep, right? The purpose for the 8 lecture series is kind of introductory to me being installed as a Grand Master in the house, most recently. And of course, like most Grand Masters or Worshipful Masters or members of the board, we typically, in some jurisdictions, it's a requirement to join some lodges or opinion bodies to produce a certain volume of work, writings, that type of thing. Maybe public speaking, events, right, lectures. So I took it. Grandmaster Crowley did not require me to do this lecture series, but I've gotten that type of the knack for it through other Masonic related organizations that I'm a member of. You know, to be a certain level or a certain status of membership, you're a full member. Usually, you're within that jurisdiction, specifically. And then if you're in a jurisdiction other than that one, but it is and it is a jurisdiction that that Grand Lodge jurisdiction recognizes, then you can't be a full member because you're not in that specific jurisdiction, but you can become an associate level member, right? And if you're in a jurisdiction that the Grand Lodge doesn't recognize, sometimes you can't join at all, and sometimes you can. As what is it? The different ones. Maybe you'll be a corresponding member or somewhere along the lines of that. And so there are requirements in some jurisdictions in those Masonic organizations in those jurisdictions that are just on the norm, requiring if you were a certain level of a member that you produce some work to contribute and to look good, right? So it makes sense that you're in the situation or status you're in, right? So I say that to say this: the purpose for the 8 lecture series on Leary's model of the 8 circuits of consciousness is not to drive very, very heavily into the Leary's model of the 8 circuits of consciousness. These circuits of consciousness, as we are visiting, are based on Leary's model, and there are other models out there. And there are other methods we're not going to cover here because we can't cover them all, presumably. Nonetheless, we're going to talk about the neurogenetic circuit and how or why or where, when, or for what it allows access to the genetic memory contained in DNA, right? Me, from what I took in college and other I go to colleges all the time for something, some credential, I've attended Tallahassee Community College. I've attended Florida Agricultural and Mechanical Universities. I've attended the University of Queensland in Australia. I've attended Hillsdale College in Michigan. I attended the National College of the Fraternal Organizations, which not many people know these Greek letters symbolism or symbolically. But if you are linguistically masterful, if you will, then you might take the 3rd course of your master's degree program, develop a little more of a positive 1.0% equity value or percent to prepend with your personal or professional or proficient commercial scale of just general cosmopolitan society or metropolitan radio broadcasting that is your citizenship would avail. You might enterprise on, you might let somebody else capitalize on it. But I could go in where we're talking about genetic memory contained in DNA and have myself just a jolly old good time in physiology or in the endocrine system. But I don't really want to get that deep into it. I really want to make sure that this is presenting opportunity for other members who might be interested in getting more attendance at functions, or credibility towards maybe becoming, proficient enough to be installed a grandmaster, right? Or just to move up from the degree you're in to the next one, right? But nonetheless, the circuit, it allows access to the genetic memory contained in DNA. It is also connected to memories of past lives, the Akashic records, and the unconscious. Right? It allows for essential immortality in humans. You get to be immortal. I don't know, right? Because well, you got a person. That person has a personality. And if you are immortal, that immortal has an immortality, right? And so it allows for essential immortality in humans. Now, as a theosophy student and a theosophy lodger, me, immortality is something we talk about a lot when we're in large meetings. Absolutely. Mortality, karma, reincarnation, the different stages, how that takes place with regard to consciousness, and it goes all the way. It first appeared among Hindu and Sufi sects in the early first millennium, this neurogenetic circuit. What's genetic memory? Because we talked about allowing access to the genetic memory contained in DNA. What's genetic memory, Master Williams? It's theorized phenomenon in which certain kinds of memories could be inherited, being present at birth in the absence of an associated sensory experience, and that such memories could be incorporated into the genome over long spans of time. A genome is the complete set of genetic information in an organism, right? So when we think about theorized phenomenon in which certain kinds of memories could be inherited, well, that's kind of tribal a little bit, isn't it? It's something that is governed over. It's a pattern, definitely, that we could see there, and lots of positive correlations within that structure are to be discovered and explored in terms of methodology, and I think that methodology, more effective than others is the psychology research methodology, which I have certification in as well. And so, it can be very interesting looking at correlations when we are really focused, or to be focused or concentrated on patterns. And with those to be, somehow attached to our internal selves, like consciousness or self-awareness, untangible things, right? When we know there are patterns that give us some idea of where to start at, to observe, to look for these things, and to understand what they are like in cause and effect, right? What they are like in life, right? Not just literature or history or arts or theory. We could really look. Wow, let's look at this here. Suppose here where I mentioned that this circuit, the neurogenetic circuit, is stimulated by a couple examples: LSD and Raja, right? Raja with the silent J. Maybe you want to put it in there, say Raja or Ray J, but I would say Raja and LSD stimulates this circuit. What if I said that, right? Are you willing, right, to steer that way, right? I certainly don't suggest it. But when we are talking about things that are internal, and we are talking about them, we are exchanging information, we are aware of the reality of consciousness, we've got to have some building blocks to help us put two and two together, right? And so, looking at the psychology research methodology, I will say we be looking for positive correlations, negative correlations, zero correlations, illusory correlations, correlation coefficients, variables, controlled experimental groups, methods to eliminate the possibility of extraneous variables or third variables. It's very interesting. The neurogenetic circuit is going to take us to genetic memory, right? So it's like this. Here we've got the neurogenetic circuit going way over, because we start there, and this is where we're going to end up, or start at next, going forward ever, backward never, to genetic memory, right? And when we look at this and the connection to memories of past lives, as the seventh circuit is connected to memories of past lives, the Akashic records and the unconscious, as well as it allows for essential immortality in humans, it's kind of, to me, sounding like this gives us a little bit of a platform, if you will, or a little avenue to connect with our consciousness, connect with the inner self, or the astral body. In theosophy we call the astral body, the one that is already formed and perfect from the very conception of it, right? So it more or less is not concerned with the superfluities or materialistic things, right? The superficialities or the subliminal, right? The Akashic records are the central storehouse of all information for every individual whom has ever lived upon the earth, called Akashic records. And this is what that's going to look like. I want to draw it using the whiteboard again, what that looks like. Right? We've got the neurogenetic records first. There's a circle, eternal circle, and we're going to label it in this lecture as the neurogenetic records. Right? Neurogenetic records there. Step back a little bit, make sure you can see it. And then we're going to have the Akashic records. And I'll step back so you can see it after it is up here a little clearer. Here is the Akashic, AKASHIK. believe it's spelled Akashic. Wait a minute, got to make sure we can even write it the right way. Maybe the K is where it belonged earlier on in the word. Memory, photographic. We use the K a lot. See, one of my Greek letters is the K, the kappa. C, Akashic records here. Right? So they're the Akashic records, the central storehouse of all information for every individual who has ever lived upon the earth. There's the Akashic records. And around that is the neurogenetic records, right? As we are dealing with the neurogenetic circuit, the neurogenetic records, right? And from that, let's just say here, we are at the unconscious. I want to change this because unconscious is well out of the ballpark. We want to line this great ball here, the crystal ball, and to use non-conscious instead. The non-conscious, right? Just giving us a break on consciousness and the the untangibility of that. We simply can't handle it. We've got to learn how to develop in its existence or presence. So we've got the Akashic records. This is the central storehouse of all information, right? And when we get the neurogenetic records going around that storehouse, then, as it seems, we've been an avenue, so to speak, that enables or allows us, or maybe it alleviates some oppositional force for us to get a little bit closer with things that influence the way we think, right? Things that influence the way we think. And this is simply because, well, we've allowed to the genetic memory contained in DNA through the neurogenetic circuit. What are we going to do with this information, Grandmaster Williams? We got access to it, but do we have any practical use for it after all? After it's all said and done and we can access it, do we have a place for it? Right? This is why we've got to understand the reality of consciousness in the first place. Not just know the word consciousness. Remember that word or how to pronounce it or what its definition is. We've got to understand through a philosophical or Masonic lens, or upon the Masonic framework, the framework of Masonic principles, the word consciousness. Right? We've got to do what we do and what we're known to do, which is to go beyond traditional education. Right? This fraternity, as post-secondary education is post-grade school, so is Freemasonry post-college. Okay? That is a fact. It is a known fact. In terms of category where it fits, we're not dangling in the wind. We are post-college education. We are a post-college education institution. When we're in the educational aspect in dialogue about Freemasonry, it's post-college. That's the level of philosophy we're talking. And so there's a model there. Now, I'll leave that there in case you might want to keep it, take a screenshot of it. And to say here that the Seventh Circuit plays a role when we are normally interacting within our senses or cognitive functioning. However, it playing that role at unawares otherwise, in other words, when we are not playing that role, by connecting us to a part of oneself that ignites our thinking. Or in other words, we become conscious from the non-conscious. So fundamental it is in things, and can therefore process us during our thought, right? So it becomes fundamental because it's dealing with memory, and we need to have a memory. The two kinds of memories: there's the habitated memory that is intentional, deliberate, and there's pure memory that I'm not very knowledgeable about, beyond in terms of how it works. That it's something that just happens, right? The pure memory. The habitated memory, I'm a lot more proficient about, because there are reasons to recall certain things that really are reserved in our minds, no matter what, rain, sleet, hail, or snow, because there are specific reasons why we're going to use them, simple, such as professionalism. That's something that's memory. Whatever field you practice, right? You're going to implement the philosophy with your habitated memory, because there are cause and effect structures that go along with the ability to explain the theories, for one, to even delve in with the philosophies or the other philosophers when talking, and it happens to this talk that is kind of be heading in a direction that's kind of down your alley, because of your field of expertise, right? When you become or start to become or appear to be becoming the enlightened Mason that is starting to shine in front of his colleagues, right? Or friends, family, whoever it is, co-workers, right? So essential immortality, we mentioned earlier. It allows for essential immortality in humans, the continued existence of an immaterial soul or mind beyond the physical death of the body. Now, again, we learn a lot about that, and we were in Theosophy. Right? We were in the United Lodge of Theosophists meeting, one of these lodges, or one of the lodges of the 102 branches of the Theosophical Society in America. We would be learning based on the writings that contain teachings of Theosophy, contributed, frankly, by Helena Petrovna Blavatsky or William Q. Judge or Olcott or Leadbeater or Besant, etc. Right? When we start to talk about beyond the physical death of the body, we're going to talk about reincarnation. These circuits of consciousness are very, very, very vital in how the body fares when transitioning from one life scale to the other. It is really grounded and rooted in consciousness. This ability to continue to exist consciously after death. To be happy in this life before death, right? So that conventionally, death is as natural and inevitable as it always is known to be among the human species, right? Ironically, we are really, really in search of an answer or an explanation to it, while all the while it's totally inevitable, right? Therefore, in that middle area, we are the bridge for these kinds of gaps, Discordians. We can understand simply in philosophy and more delve into physiology, more of a dedication to the field of psychology, and more contributions to continued research in sociology. that we could, we could say, supposedly, when we restore our Akashic records, right? When we've gone out to our neurogenetic records via a consciousness, right? As a result of having the Akashic records, and we can harness our emotional intelligence. That's somehow forging a safe haven or sanctuary for our experiences and our photographic memory, images, fragments of reality, things that have occurred and things that happen, right? And preserve our state of being in the case of passing away, death. Because what one incentive, one profound incentive, you ask me, is that we don't know the appropriate time death is to occur upon oneself, nor anybody else. We do not know that much, right? So a lot of it is way out of our hands, in my opinion. And, being able to harness our emotional intelligence, put into perspective our memory, which is a habitated memory, usually, or selective, thus restore our pure memory, is to come to the total or the sum, right? Pure memory is not going to have anything to do more than being a foundation or a basis for our entire structure or composition when it comes to literally verbatim being at peace after death, not just deceased and remembered, right? To literally exist in comfort and satisfaction, those emotions, after death, we are going to have to understand the importance of forging our memory through these disciplines, through these knowledges, higher degrees, wisdom of the masters, because they are each as human beings talking the same talk we are talking, right? They've talked it so much, they've no concern for how they are to be after death. And we've come to understand it's very more so possible than not, probable than not, rather, that they are very knowledgeably at ease and at rest as they have passed on. Because they have, while in this sphere, if you will, diligently practiced and researched and studied and meditated and concentrated on the within as well as the without. They've dedicated themselves to it. They've not made it conventional. They've not made it circumstantial. They've accepted their existence in the universe independently as individuals. And in Hindu sects, this thing's been said to have appeared first, as well as among Sufi sects. There are 4 Hindu sects I will share. The first one is Vaishnavism. The second is Shaivism. The third is Shaktism. And the fourth is Smartism. You can look those up if you would like, learn a little bit more about them. Sufi sects, a little different sort of. Sufism is not a distinct sect. It's the reason why. It's not a distinct sect, right? It's a method of understanding or approaching a religion, right? So let's look at this here on the whiteboard. So we get rid of this one, the diagram here. Pretty little picture there. Let's look at this one. Again, we're going to go with the Akashic Records, of course, the central storehouse of all information. Yeah. So we can't leave it out, can we? Absolutely not, sir. The Akashic Records. We got the Akashic Records there, don't we? Now, let's look at the genome. Which we've already talked about what a genome is. Right? And let's encompass Akashic Records with a larger circle we will label genome. And let's do one more to encompass this circle labeled genome. Try not to let your eyeballs cross when you're watching me draw. And we're going to label this one genetic memory. Is that fair enough? From the genetic memory, we're going to the unconscious. We're talking about after death at this point in the lecture. So let's go unconscious in this little area here. Not to the genome. So we don't want to pay attention to what here is what's known as the trilogy space. Is where we start to go into the third dimension, right? Or what it is all the way around, which is the mathematical space, where we would be in the fourth dimension. Mathematical space. We're not going there here. We're just on the circle, the genetic memory, when we talk about unconsciousness, right? Why is that? Well, as we talked about it earlier, the genome is the complete set of genetic information in an organism, right? So unconscious persons, right there. Genetic memory definitely playing a part there. And founded on the Akashic Records. But we can see them kind of interchangeably, if you will. Sort of how in real time the 8 circuits of consciousness go on, right? And just what's the total of consciousness. Well, those 8 circuits are meant for us to understand consciousness as a whole. And to do that, sure, we've had to go ahead and avail or reveal what, components are to consciousness. Otherwise, not really much of a need to understand the 8 circuits of consciousness, especially, in my opinion, when one of them, or while one of them, as we look here, Leary's model, the 8 circuits of consciousness, we've got 1 conscious circuit, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Each one of them has 3 stages that detail the developmental points of the circuit. So ultimately, there are 24. Positive correlation of the working tools of Freemasonry. Wow. One of them being the 24-inch gauge. Can't really fit that all in here where it belongs in the Venn diagram, but here would be the 24-inch gauge. And why would it be there? And working tools here in circle B intersecting with circle A. Because consciousness is going to have a lot to do with, using the working tool, the 24-inch gauge, implementing it into our personal daily lifestyle behavior. It is going to take consciousness to care about the tenets of Freemasonry. It takes consciousness to care about the principles of Freemasonry. It takes consciousness to care about the 4 cardinal virtues of Freemasonry. Right? Because this is a fraternity. It's not mandatory that we'll become members of the Freemasonic order. Right? It's voluntary, and it takes dedication. It takes time. Not everybody has time to give to it. And for some people, for many people, that's the reason they are not members as we speak. And for no other reason. Just don't have enough time. We got too much other things going on. And I totally understand that. But yes, each circuit has 3 stages that detail the developmental points of each circuit. And about the 24-inch gauge, well, the 24-inch gauge is based on 24%. And what we look at, similar to Leary's model of the 8 circuits of consciousness, just visually, is 3 segments, I like to refer to them as, portions of the day of 8 hours, right? And that equals 24. The first are for service to others. The second, service to God. And the final, as I understand, these are to be done chronologically. We don't skip around or switch them. Rest, sleep, relaxation, the final 8 hours. But all, the better it is to know the 24-inch gauge working in this way, right? Because in a day, which is a 24 hours, which is what the 24-inch gauge is based on, well, if it's 11 p.m. at night and then it turns to 12 a.m., and we're sitting there watching an hour go by, we're not watching 24 hours go by. So why would we say, if, for example, today's Saturday, tomorrow's Sunday, and today's Saturday at 11 p.m., and when 12 a.m. comes around, we've, to say it's Sunday, and it's not been 24 hours that we have experienced. But we would say that the day has changed because of the time frame. Right? So what we often have done in life and civilization is not been very accurate about keeping up with the clock and the time, as well as we do with physical labor and how much it costs to carry advanced percent bundles, if you will, right? Or psychologies, or cosmetics, or aesthetics, that type of thing, which is a different, it's more philosophy thing. But that's one thing about the 8 circuits of consciousness. Another important thing here is this first 4 are related to survival of organisms on Earth. And I want to capitalize the letter E. While this latter 4 are in use for future evolution of humans. And so when we look at the graphic of it, well, it's a lot more complicated than it really occurs in real time, isn't it? Or consciousness and the 5 stages of change theory and all of this literature, this information we can write about. And then we look at the volume of how much it is that we're trying to carry, and we think about it in terms of carry again, instead of in terms of science and relativity. So we are in much of a practice in this world, in this modern age, of somehow just wanting to leave all of the hard work, all of the blood, sweat, and tears up to the great architect of the universe who knows better how to do these things than we do, right? Who's the creator of these things. Yeah. And so when we are in the essential immortality experience, we can also feel very comfortable and welcome to our memories. I mean, it's either this or we go on to death and life after death, and we aren't conscious. And nobody here in the mortal world is going to know anything about it. It's way too late to notify anyone or to look for any assistance or any help there, right? So we can have access to our memories, and that will give us access to consciousness. And then we are understood, not just understanding, we're understood among the 8 circuits of consciousness, or in reflection of the 8 circuits of consciousness, right? And that is going to conclude lecture 7 of the 8 lecture series on Leary's model of the 8 circuits of consciousness. I'm glad again that you were able to attend, and hopefully we will convene for the final lecture of this series, lecture 8, right? I'll disclose what lecture 8 is, or what the 8th circuit of consciousness is, when we convene again. At which time we will meet upon the level of equality, act by the plumb of uprightness, and part upon the square of virtues.